The new adaptation of Legend of the Galactic Heroes gets a lot of criticism. Many of the people who watched the original 110 episode OVA series stay away from it due to its character art alone. But is it a good adaptation on its own? How does it compare to the original adaptation? This is a deeper dive from my previous videos, since I've now finished the entire De Noitese series. I like to start with some excerpts from 2 short interviews done by the staff. I would like to thank Drifting Translator for providing these English translations. Series composition Takagi Noboru states on how he got involved. I happened to find that Ginga Enyu Denset was published in Kindle version, so I read it thinking, how I missed this. Afterwards, I received an email from production IG producer Kuroki Rui asking me, are you interested in Ginga Enyu Denset? I replied, I'm rereading it. Question, have you ever read the original novels before that? I did back when I was in my 20s. I thought it was very interesting. Even when I reread it this year, I still thought that it's such an interesting work. I read it for the fascinating characters at the first time. But now, as I reread it, I discovered new things. I think this is a work that will keep on giving no matter how many times you reread it. Elsewhere in the interview, he said, I wanted to show the drama of each character from the beginning. I told them I didn't want to sweep past characters from a bird's eye view, but instead looking at them from up close. However, this is exactly what happens with a lot of the characters here. But there is a reason for that, and I will explain later. Tragically, he would add, although there were parts that I had to cut out with tears running down my face, there were also parts that I expanded. I wonder what those parts were. Question. For you personally, what kind of work do you want Ginga Enyu Denset's De Noitese to be? I want this to be the work of my lifetime. The following answer is on character designs. For the characters with physical look clearly described in the original novels, we decided to use designs that are not too different from those in Ishiguro's adaptation. On the other hand, for characters without specific descriptions, the 3 character designers are free to design with their own personal style, and they went all out designing characters that look different, that could match those in Ishiguro's adaptation. When I saw the results, I felt excitedly surprised. Oh, that's the way. Next are excerpts from director Tada Shunzuke. Question. For a start, please tell us the story of how you became the director of Ginga Enyu Denset's De Noitese. I've been a fan of Ginga Enyu Denset since I was in school. The official poster in the anime magazine made me interested, so I went to watch the first theatrical movie, My Conquest is a Sea of Stars, and it was beautiful. From the theater, I went straight to a bookstore in Shinjuku and bought the original novels, as many as possible, and went home. Ever since I became a director, I've always wanted to try producing a work that's set in an expansive universe like Ginga Enyu Denset. I also told production IG CEO Ishikawa Matsuhisa, I want to try making a work set in an expansive universe for only once. Laughs. At that time, I wasn't expecting that Ginga Enyu Denset would be adapted into anime again. I just thought I wanted to try being involved in the production of a work like that, even only as an episode director. Later that day, CEO Ishikawa asked me, do you want to direct Ginga Enyu Denset? Question. This time, as a director of the new anime adaptation of Ginga Enyu Denset, what things are you especially concerned about? I said that I love it as an ensemble performance, so the most important thing for me was properly producing it with my own approach, because I really love the anime directed by Ishiguro. If I'm not careful, I might just reproduce it. However, because De Noitese is not a remake, I'm always aware that in directing, although I keep the dialogues of the original novels, I can easily put my favorite elements into them. That's the first thing I thought. And your favorite elements are? Surely I love the simple style of the conversation, but if I had to pick, maybe it's atmosphere. For instance, a scene when it's only a man standing alone, but somehow it looks picture perfect, is something I like, but also something I'm good at. I fuss over the way Reinhardt sits on the captain's seat in the trailer. I asked an animator who could draw the atmosphere the way I wanted it to do it. Also, I pay great attention to the energy of the young characters. Reinhardt and the other characters are actually in their 20s. Although, of course, I respect and love the solemnity of the anime that Ishiguro directed, I want De Noitese to have this feeling of the walking speed of a man in his 20s. I think that's where my strength lies. End of interviews. With these answers and ideas in mind, it will give the viewers a grasp of the kind of mindset the staff approached the project with, and why they decided to go with certain choices. Now, how is the new adaptation? On its own, it does a decent job. Legend of the Galactic Heroes is a great and complex story that is now being handled by a staff that is acceptable. How is it compared to the 80s OVA series? It's trash, an embarrassment. a watered-down, rushed mess that failed to excel in where the original staff for the 80s version did. How? The original staff tried to fix as many flaws with the novels as they could. This led to an ocean of anime-only content that made the story so much better. Events were switched around on the timeline, immense amounts of dialogue was added or switched between characters. Characters like Dusty were given a much bigger role in the 80s OVA series, which worked perfectly, whereas in the new adaptation, Dusty is rarely ever seen. This would explain the frustration many viewers of the original felt while watching Di no Etese. All that time, all the anime-only content is gone. The new adaptation is much more faithful to the novels, but it's nearly copy-paste, which keeps the flaws that the novels had that the original adaptation has skillfully improved on. And as I said earlier, the staff went with their own character designs to characters that weren't described in the novels, resulting in sometimes dramatically different appearances for some characters. I still find Kitty Ice's character design horrifying and atrocious regardless. Because Di no Etese takes this approach, there are many parts that look new that are essentially from the novel and unchanged, unlike in the original, such as Yang pulling Jessica out of the building after she criticized Trunick and having to drive away from an assassin in a truck, whereas in the OVA series, they changed it to Jessica walking out alone and getting confronted by Trunick's terrorist minions. The Rosenritter introduced scene where Shonkov saves the woman is not there, whereas in the new adaptation, they meet in the lockers. Dusty is rarely there, as the original OVA had replaced minor characters with him and given him so much more dialogue. Fahrenheit is nearly absent at the moment also. When Greenhill is murdered, there is no scene where Federica's loyalty is put into question. One of the few disappointing character executions in the new adaptation is the Yang Wenli and Jessica Williams love story. In Di no Etese, Jessica meets Yang, appearing to look somewhat like a creepy stalker. Lap dies before the viewers even know the backstory, which ruins the meaning of it. By the time it's explained, hardly anyone cares at that point. Jessica and Yang Wenli don't get any of the nice and intimate moments they had in the original OVA series. No stepping on shoes moment, no alone moments where they almost kiss. It's all gone and there's almost no story there. At least it got a little better when they start showing the more radicalized version of Jessica. But even her story in the stadium was rushed, and she died a sort of cartoony death. On the other hand, it was interesting that they went with the novels and added the part where Yang knew of Jessica's death. He put on the shades for the whole day to hide his emotions. Kitty Ice and Reinhardt's relationship is watered down and bland. It's so simplistic it completely fails to portray the intimate best friend relationship they had in the OVA series. The narrator himself is watered down and bland, a mere shell of what he was in the original. All the great political speeches he'd make about history, war, and mankind are gone. Then you have the character designs. I want to point out again that it's fine if Kitty Ice is drawn differently, but that didn't stop the staff from failing and making him look ugly. However, there are many times the viewers get confused about who is who because of the soulless and bland type of designs that make many of the characters look alike or unrecognizable at times. The music. Yes, the music in this adaptation is terrible. There's that awful aggressive piano song that plays early on, and that awkward and goofy trumpet song that plays for the Free Planets Alliance. At least the opening and ending by Hiroyuki Sawano are decent, though he tends to plagiarize himself and sound the same sometimes. Take for instance the ending of 86, which sounds like a cheap ripoff of Eagle from Gundam Unicorn. Obviously, the original 80s adaptation excelled in the music department, making Di no Etese look like unfortunately sad garbage. The pacing, as I sort of mentioned before, is very fast in Di no Etese. Sometimes they rush through parts and instantly resolve them. There's a scene where a mini arc is introduced, and a second later it skips it and moves on, because it follows the novel so much more strictly with little input from the staff compared to the 80s adaptation. It carries the novel's problems such as rushing mini arc by mini arc with little build-up and meaning. Because the pacing is so fast, sometimes the dialogue suffers and makes it a struggle to keep up. This tends to happen a lot with Yang Wenli early on, even though it started improving recently. The dialogue itself is one of its worst problems. It is nowhere near as thought-provoking or as politically conscious as the 80s adaptation. Some of the characters will say a single line that means nothing, or engage in such small talk where the viewers were expecting something much more deep. For example, when Reinhardt would look at the stars, he'd do some analysis comparing them to his ambitions, to Kitty Ice, whereas here, he would just say, "Oh, I was just looking at the stars." Considering all the problems with this new adaptation, it has been getting better. The last 4 episodes, or Di no Etese Seiran 3, show a lot of improvement. It's called The Movie, It's called a movie, but it's really just 4 episodes. It carries on where Kitty Ice manages to overtake and achieve supremacy. Where Reinhardt manages to overtake and achieve supremacy over the parasitic and cowardly nobles. This is where Reinhardt sends Admiral Lynch, the failure of the Free Planet's El Facil incident, back to them during a 2 million prisoner of war exchange to cause a civil war in the Alliance, to give Reinhardt a chance to deal with his own civil war without having to worry about getting attacked. Kitty Ice confronts Reinhardt about the Westerland question, and though it was Oberstein's doing to a certain extent, Reinhardt lets his emotions get the best of him, and he fails to properly explain to Kitty Ice what had happened. Julian has no visible character development. He goes from a simple child caretaker of Yang Wenli to someone with similar wisdom comparable to a fleet admiral way too fast. The space battles, though shown with modern CGI, fail to grasp the brutal and gory depiction of the original OVA, or any of the real technical and tactical side of them. And of course, the death of Kitty Ice happens here. Its execution is decent, but the scene where Oberstein rushed in to take the rocket launcher hit from Reinhardt is not there, as it was an anime-only edition in the original 80s adaptation. That's an iconic moment that sadly is absent, as it subtly reassures you about Oberstein's sincere loyalty to Reinhardt. But I did really enjoy the conclusion of this set of episodes, where they explain how Reinhardt kept Kitty Ice's tombstone simple and to the point, saying that he was just my friend. While Yang went to go visit Lap and Jessica's graves. One thing Dino Etese has done right is Marcus and Schneider. Their unfolding story of becoming frustrated with the nobles and defecting to join Yang Wenli was done very good. Mittermeier and Ruando are portrayed decently enough to show how close they are, just not amazing. Oberstein is done adequately. Schoenkoff is among my favorite readapted characters here, and was given a high-tier voice actor that plays the role very well. The new incoming season will be 24 episodes, though it's not clear yet when it will be released. And seeing as though Dino Etese has been slightly improving since the start, I will be looking forward to it and talking about it once it starts airing. I think the new season might air maybe next year. It's unsure yet. But thank you for listening.